Welcome in, comrades. My name is Jack Sperry, and this is the Commander's Report. On today's show, we're going to be discussing Shaka Toney being suspended by the NFL for gambling. I can't wait to break that one down with you guys. But then after that, I'm going to be breaking down the top draft needs for your Washington Commanders. But before we get into all of today's action, we are currently in a sub-battle with the rest of the channels here in the NFC East. And let me tell you guys, this is still winnable. We're ahead of the Giants by a couple there, but the Cowboys Report and Eagles Now are in the lead. Right now, we're trying to grow this channel. So if you love the Washington Commanders and you want to help us win this sub-battle, you want to stick it to the rest of the teams here in the NFC East, do me a favor, click that subscribe button for me right now. So now the big news of the day here is that Shaka Toney, edge rusher, backup edge rusher here for your Washington Commanders, has been suspended indefinitely by the National Football League because he gambled on NFL football games last season. Now, here's what Ian Rappaport, this is the report here that he came out with here. NFL suspended 5 players, including Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams, for violations of NFL gambling policy. Lions C.J. Moore and Quintez Cephas, plus Commanders' Shaka Toney, are suspended indefinitely at least 1 year. Williams and Detroit Stanley Berryhill are suspended 6 games. And then shortly after this, the Commanders came out with a statement here, and they said, "We have been made aware of the suspension of Shaka Toney. We have cooperated fully with the NFL's investigation since receiving notice and support the league's findings and actions. All further questions on the topic should be directed to the NFL League office." Now, this is just a stupid, dumb, idiotic mistake by Shaka Toney, man. You have to know the rules on these sorts of things, and it's not like Jameson Williams where, they were betting on non-NFL games, right? But it was inside the facility, which I think is a stupid rule, by the way. But anyway, Toney was betting on NFL games. That's a big, big no-no in professional sports, and he's been suspended for a year. And, we've already seen with the Lions have been very quick to cut some of these players that have been suspended indefinitely. Will the Commanders do the same? It'll definitely be interesting here. I'm recording this before any potential cut happens. So if you're watching this and Toney's been cut by the Commanders, just know that information. But, what about these NFL gambling rules, man? I completely agree 100% that NFL players should not be betting on any NFL game, period. I think that's a 100% legitimate rule that should exist. But however, some of these players like Jameson Williams, they're getting suspended 6 games for betting on non-NFL games from within the facility. What is this? I just think it's just a ridiculously dumb rule that the NFL has. I don't think that, players should be punished for that sort of thing. I don't get why they can do it outside of the facility versus inside the facility. I think that's a rule that they should get rid of, but that's just my 2 cents. Let me know what you guys think about that rule in the comments section here. Should NFL players be suspended for betting on non-NFL games? Let me know in the comments section. Is this BS? Type yes or no in the comments section. This is going to be the pinned comment on today's show. So whenever you get an ad break, go down to the comments section, find that pinned comment, and answer today's question. All right, so now that we've got that news out of the way, let's go over some of the top draft needs for your Washington Commanders. Now, the way that I'm going to be doing this here, I'm going to be breaking it up into 3 different categories. I'm going to be doing true team needs, things that they need to address in this year's NFL draft. I got 3 of those. Then we got a couple that are just wants, like things that you want to address, but you don't necessarily have to. And then I'm going to wrap things up with some positions that they could get some depth in. So let's just jump right in here with some needs. Number 1 on my list is tight end. Now, Logan Thomas is fine. Okay, Logan Thomas is an okay NFL tight end. But Eric Bieniemy is coming in. He's coming in from the Kansas City Chiefs. And, man, he is going to want that receiving threat in the slot that he had in Kansas City to run his offense to the complete extent that he wants to run it. And in order to do that, you need a true receiving threat in the tight end position. To me, Logan Thomas is not that. He's kind of like a mid, kind of average NFL tight end, in my opinion. And if you want to make a big splash here and you want to get what some people are calling the next Travis Kelce, you can go out and get Dalton Kincaid in the first round, or maybe even if he falls to the second round. Who knows? But, at 6'4", 240 pounds, Dalton Kincaid might be the top draft target for Washington this year in the NFL draft. It would not shock me whatsoever if Kincaid was the pick at 16. In fact, I think he should be the betting favorite to be the pick because you're bringing in Eric Bieniemy. He's going to want that receiving threat in his offense, and Dalton Kincaid is the best receiving threat in this year's NFL draft class. Then we get into the next need here, inside linebacker, specifically an inside linebacker that can cover, because Jamin Davis and Cody Barton from Seattle, like, they're not very good in coverage, just plain and simple. You look at their numbers throughout their career, you watch them on film, they're not very good in pass coverage. They're better at other things like blitzing and run defense and that sort of stuff. You need to bring in somebody like on my top 5 inside linebacker list here. Most of these guys are pretty darn good. In fact, all these guys are pretty darn good in pass coverage. My number 1 guy is Daiyan Henley. I think he's the most complete prospect at the position in this draft class. Jack Campbell is kind of that 1B to Daiyan Henley's 1A. Really, really like him as well. Drew Sanders, I think, is a bit underrated in terms of pass coverage. I think he's a very talented pass coverage inside linebacker, in my opinion. Dorian Williams, a little bit undersized, but he's excellent in his technique. And then Savoccia Dennis out of the University of Pittsburgh is also great as well. He's my number 5 guy. And I would be fine with any one of these guys, but just as long as you get the guy that can cover for you day one in the NFL. Then we get into the final need here, and I think the Commanders need to address edge rusher. Not necessarily for a starting position, but eventually Montez Sweat is likely going to be gone, whether it be via trade, whether it be he leaves in free agency next year. I just don't think the Commanders have the money available to give Montez Sweat. You're already paying Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen. You're about to pay Chase Young a ton of money, in my opinion, because I think Chase Young is going to have a breakout season next year. Montez Sweat doesn't really fit into that picture. Now, he's a really good player right now, but I think you have to go out and get yourself another edge rusher for, at the very least, learn from Montez Sweat and Chase Young this season so they can replace Sweat going into the future. All right, guys, let me know in the comments section, what is the biggest position of need for the Washington Commanders heading into the 2023 NFL Draft? We're less than a week away from the start of the NFL Draft this year, guys. I cannot believe it. It's just flown by this year. But let me know what you guys think. What is the biggest team need for your Washington Commanders? All right, so now let's go over some of the wants, some of the positions that you don't necessarily need to fill, but you would definitely really like to fill if you are Ron Rivera and the Washington Commanders. Number 1 for me is outside cornerback. And we know that the secondary for the Commanders has definitely had its struggles over the last couple of years. I look at guys like Kendall Fuller, who had a really good season last year, in my opinion, but he's not a true number 1 guy. And then you've got some pretty decent pieces here. Cameron Dantzler, Benjamin St-Juste will probably be vying for a starting spot somewhere. Danny Johnson, somebody that is a bit smaller, might be playing in the slot, but you're missing kind of that true lockdown number 1 type corner. These are the 5 guys that I think could fit in to what the Commanders really want to do on defense. Christian Gonzalez is the best fit for your Commanders this year. You've heard me talk about him time and time again on the show. Witherspoon is also great. Deontay Banks, very likely that he's available at number 16. He could very well be the pick for the Commanders as well. Joey Porter Jr., Emmanuel Forbes, those are kind of some of your later pieces there that I think that I really like as well. And if you get any one of those 5 guys, I think that you are happy if you are the Washington Commanders. Then we get into nickel cornerback. So not just outside cornerback, but you would also like to address nickel cornerback. Danny Johnson is probably the presumptive slot cornerback right now, but you take a look at him, man. He's played mostly on the outside in his career. Maybe you would like to add like a Brian Branch, somebody like that that's going to be an elite slot corner for you right away in the National Football League. It's something to think about. Not sure if they will end up doing this because I think they might put Danny Johnson there at the slot position next year, but something to keep your eye on. Then we got interior offensive line, and I don't think I need to tell you guys the offensive line needs some retooling. They've made some moves in NFL free agency so far, and I really think that you get like Nick Gates, and you got Chase Roulier in there, and you got Andrew Norwell in the middle there, and I think that if you are the Commanders and you have an opportunity to get an interior offensive lineman, I would 100% take that. And then also on the outside, offensive tackle is something you might want to do as well. You get Andrew Wiley, you get Charles Leno Jr. here, and I think that those guys are okay, but if you have an opportunity, if one of these tackles falls to you, that you really, really like and you think can be a potential starter for you in the future, I wouldn't mind taking a shot on those guys. But overall, I think the bigger need is on the interior of the offensive line. So let me know, which is the bigger need here? Is it inside or out? What is the biggest need on the offensive line right now for your Commanders? Type T for offensive tackle, type I for offensive interior, or type B if you think the Commanders really need to address both. All right, so now finally here, I'm going to be going over kind of the depth pieces, some of the depth positions that the Commanders might be looking to add a couple pieces to kind of fill out the roster a little bit. Number one, quarterback. You got Sam Howell, you got Jacoby Brissett. I think if you have an opportunity to get somebody you really like, and getting him at a value, I think you take that. Maybe Trey Lance is an option as well. I think you're okay with Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell. You don't need to make a reach. You don't need to trade a bunch of draft capital to move up for somebody. If somebody falls to you, then great. Or if you can get a good deal for a quarterback, then great. But you don't need to address that if you're Ron Rivera, in my opinion. Then wide receiver, you have a bunch of kind of smaller receivers on this team. They're very good receivers. You got Terry McLaurin, John Dotson. You got some really good kind of smaller receivers. If you want to get a bigger guy, maybe later in the later rounds, kind of be more of a red zone threat, I think that'd be a good depth piece for the Commanders. And then running back, Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, they have said that they're going to add another running back this offseason at some point. I think they will eventually draft another running back to go along with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. So that's going to do it for today's show, guys. Make sure to go follow me on Twitter at Jack_Sperry for my NFL draft rankings. I'm breaking down each position, giving my top 10 list for each position in this year's NFL draft. I got my NFL mock drafts up on there. So if you want additional NFL draft and Commanders content, go ahead, go to Twitter, follow me at Jack_Sperry.